Thank you all for joining today. We are going to talk about how to architect your L&D function, how to build scalable, high-impact L&D solutions. And I have two special guests here with me who will introduce themselves shortly. I'm Rhea Rotholds. I lead the Learning Solutions team at Hone. Been with Hone for about 3 years, consulting organizations on their L&D functions. And prior to that, I led learning and development at Dow Jones, so global company of Wall Street Journal. So I've been on the in-house side and the consulting side, and I'm really thrilled to be joined today by Minji and Wendy, and I will let them introduce themselves. Minji, would you like to go first?
Thanks, Rhea. Hi, my name is Minji Lew. I'm the Director of People Development at Greenhouse. If you don't know what Greenhouse is, it's a recruiting software platform, sort of grown as an applicant tracking system and has grown in all of our products since then. We're about 650 people and we are a fully distributed company. I am based in Los Angeles and I have here behind me that you can't see my dog sleeping under the bed. That's my best friend. Wendy, over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Minji. Hey, everyone. So I'm Wendy Taylor Wampler. I'm the Vice President of Learning and Talent Development at LAZ Parking. I'm pretty new to the parking and transportation industry. I've been at LAZ for a year and a half. Prior to that, I come from tech. I spent 7 years at Indeed, overseeing leadership development and organizational effectiveness for them. But I've got a lot of different industries in my background: education, government, consulting, nonprofit. But I'm having a lot of fun at LAZ, and I can't wait to tell you about it. I'm calling you from Austin, and I'll tell you a little bit more about LAZ when we get going. So thanks for being here and having me.
Yes, thank you both. So we are spanning the US. I didn't realize California, Texas, and then I'm in Florida for any of you on the East Coast. So before we dive in, just really quickly for anyone who has never heard of Hone, who's hosting today's webinar, we are the all-in-one employee development platform. We have the largest collection of live instructor-led learning in the world. And if you're interested in learning more, we'll have more information for you. But we are also a smaller tech company, and I support all of our customers that range from other small tech companies through enterprise global learning teams. And so I'll be here to represent the perspectives of all the different folks that I work with. And then, of course, we're really excited that we have Minji from the tech background. We have Wendy from the transportation background and a bunch of other backgrounds too. So really looking forward to learning from both of you today. I am very excited to hand it off to Minji, who will be kicking off her presentation, and then we'll go to Wendy, and then we'll go to Q&A.
All right, wonderful. Okay, we've got 4 juicy topics that I'm just going to blitz through and jump straight into it. So one of the key things we wanted to talk about today was aligning your L&D strategy to company needs. I wanted to first set context of what my team oversees and then talk through a model that helped us with prioritizing what we want to achieve throughout the years. So on my team, we own learning and development programs and technology tools. We own the design, the delivery, and the enablement on our performance management process. We also own our engagement survey, which is design, administration, data analysis, and the consulting portion of that to our executive leaders when it comes to action planning. And then we will take on ad hoc team effectiveness projects for specific departments and leaders. Those can be in the form of offsite design facilitation, team norming exercises, prioritization sessions for teams, things of that nature. So with that context of what we own, I wanted to share with you the model that I designed when I first joined Greenhouse March of 2023 last year. Also at the time, my husband and I were renovating our house that we now live in. So I figured, why don't I just blend those two lives together? And so I created this framework that I call 3F framework: foundation, frame, and furnish, because indeed I was tasked, my mission at Greenhouse was to build the L&D or people development house. And so we spent the better half of last year building the core components of what a people development function could be here. And that really set us up for success to deliver everything that we did that was a bit more holistic this year. I'm going to get into what those things actually were in a second. I just want to describe the model that you could leverage. And now we're heading into 2025 planning, and we're looking at the ways that we can mature our processes, use new technology tools to advance what we deliver, and span more development needs across different levels of people as well in the organization. So we're in the midst of figuring that out right now. And I hope to come back to another webinar and talk about what Furnish looked like in the future. So the 4 questions that were really helpful for me in figuring out what to do at each stage were these. What is urgent? At the time, Greenhouse was 14 years old. They had never had a L&D function in the people team ever. And so I needed to figure out very quickly, what did they need yesterday and that I need to deliver ASAP. I also could figure out, what can I punt 6 months, 1 year, 2 years down the road when we as a function and Greenhouse is ready for those more mature offerings. What can we buy? I was very grateful to have a pretty healthy, large budget, and that helped us buy things like home membership that we've been able to leverage. And then identifying finally, what can we build based on the talent that was on my team, and also the things that needed that more customized Greenhouse specific, like white glove service. And I'll get to tell you about a program that was actually a result of making that decision. So using those 4 questions, I was able to map out what it was that we were trying to achieve and what we did. So I'm going to share with you first in foundation, we hired up the people development team. We designed and delivered a pilot of our custom in-house manager development program, and that was very successful. We launched and revamped our engagement survey and designed what the action planning process looked like that the BPs could then execute with their department leaders. We also designed and delivered the goal setting process as the part 1 of what is our larger performance process. And of course, we were able to identify the L&D technology tools we wanted to partner with. We purchased those, and we designed a few offsites and facilitated those last year. And so this year, we've been able to build upon those things. We launched and marketed our L&D technology platforms like Hone internally. We've seen incredible engagement metrics using that tool at Greenhouse, and it's a staple now. We designed and launched our LMS, which has become this beautiful central hub that is Greenhouse branded. And now all these department leaders are coming in and designing their own trainings in our LMS. It's something that we're building together as a company, which is fantastic. We scaled our manager development program to more cohorts. We've now completed 3 cohorts of managers, about 75 managers in the org. And we also scaled that program to have a high-performing IC version for about 50 ICs. And they just completed that program a couple weeks ago. This is a lot. So we have designed and delivered our new performance review program. We did a very robust mid-year process this year that is going to be slimmed down in the future, but set us up for what is now the new structured, standardized process for us. And we're about to launch into that for the year end very soon. And lastly, we really expanded the insight gathering and the consultation that we provided to our executive leaders, our engagement surveys to improve engagement, rebuild trust with the org, move these metrics that were ultimately hitting us in retention of our employees. And so that's been a great partnership with the executive team. So you can see how at foundation and frame, we've been able to build upon previous things and scale our processes and our tools. Okay, moving swiftly along. So I want to talk quickly about the very scrappy team that I have that have been able to help us achieve all those things. In 2023, I actually had only 1 direct report, people development specialist. And in January of this year, I was able to get another headcount, and now I have a very still lean team, but we are able to deliver a lot. And they have each of their own areas of expertise. Shout out to Jacob. He is leading our leadership programs. He supports with our manager program, our IC program, our LMS. So there's the learning expertise there. And then shout out to Vanessa. She is owning a lot of our program design and administration of the performance management process and our engagement survey. And these are very data heavy focus areas. And I will say that the one thing that I have learned by leading like 3 specialists who have like very multifaceted roles, they're wearing a lot of hats, they're having to switch context a lot and do a lot of different things. There's 2 skills that have really surfaced as the most important in this kind of team, which is on the technical side, people who are incredibly operationally on top of it. They are project managers, they keep organized, they know what's coming next, and they prepare for those. That is something that you could keep in mind as you're thinking about designing the jobs themselves, or recruiting talent, or even measuring performance once they're in seat. That's a critical skill. And a behavioral skill that pairs really well with that operational project management is an owner mentality. Understanding that that specialist is fully responsible for their work. That is their baby. They have to ensure that everything needs to get done and the decisions are made and the stakeholders are brought in. So just having full ownership of that means the execution can happen flawlessly. So that's that I like to share. Data is one of like my most favorite things to talk about that we've been able to, I think, flesh out very effectively at Greenhouse. And I'm going to show an example primarily from our manager development program. So the data you're about to see is covering only 2 cohorts. We just wrapped up our 3rd cohort, and so these numbers will be updated. But I'll just say that a lot of the typical metrics that in L&D that we measure are about the experience. Did that participant find the information useful? Did they think the instructor was knowledgeable? Would they recommend the class? And that's fine and dandy, lovely. But I think the thing that can be really helpful in proving or getting more resources or proving the efficacy of the program is actually measuring impact of a program. So what we've done is we actually surveyed, by the way, Bloom is the name of our manager development program when we call our participants Bloomies. We actually surveyed our participants before the program and asked, how confident are you in these 5 skills that we're going to cover in the program? 3 months later, when the program was completed, we surveyed them again and we asked, what's your confidence now after the program? And what we saw was an average 12% increase in confidence amongst those participants in just a matter of 3 months. Some skills only increased 5%, but other skills like change management increased by 33%. So that proving that impact of the time and energy and the investment put into a program is really critical. I think has set us apart in compared to other L&D functions at other companies who are still trying to prove that the investment, right? We also know that managers who are developed and they become more effective managers, there's a ripple effect on their direct reports and their teams. And so we actually surveyed the direct reports of the participants before the program and after the program as well. And we asked them, how competent do you think your leader is in these 5 skills? And what we saw is that there was a 6% increase that they noticed just 3 months on these skills. My personal benchmark has been about 3 to 5% of an increase amongst those direct reports. And so 6 is blowing it out of the water a bit. And I'll show you on the next slide how we've even measured more of that ripple effect. But that is the most critical pieces here. And then these last ones here, we asked our participants, do you feel like the program supported your career goals? Do you think that the program supported your ability to support your team's career goals? And we saw high results there. And then we asked the direct reports of the participants point blank, like, do you feel like your manager has grown as a leader from this program? And we also saw high scores there. So, okay. That's a lot to absorb. I'm happy to clarify that later if need be. I'll move on to say that because we own the engagement survey on my team, we were able to actually look at, did the Bloomies receive higher engagement scores on manager-specific questions? And you can see here on the right, my manager is a great coach for me. There's one about decision making and feedback. These are things that we can see even stacked ranked, like the managers who have been in Bloom and who have not, and how those scores are different. Okay. Woo, last topic here, build relationships and get executive buy-in. I think about this in 4 different audiences. The first is executive sponsor, having someone at a C-suite level who can be a mentor to you, who can advocate for you in your work. I'm lucky to have one of those in Jung McCann, who's our chief legal officer. And that has been helpful in setting up. It was actually most helpful during foundation when we were just getting started. And you're so new to the org and you're setting this new thing up, and just to have someone to be there for you is a game changer. I think about the core team as your fellow HR leaders who own their own functions, but they can give historical context, they can give guidance about the way things work here, and just align strategically with what they're working on to not conflict with what you're working on, but support what it is that you're trying to achieve. Business leaders are those leaders who are in the org, they're running their own P&Ls, whatever it may be, and they're actually able to give you real world feedback about how effective and the prioritization of skills that you're focusing on in your programs, and they can drive that messaging down into the teams. This is probably the most challenging group, but what I'm going to say is that the next slide, I'll show you how I've been able to get allies amongst these leaders. And then finally, on my team, we think about our employees as customers and we want to satisfy them as much as possible. And so we always get feedback. The most engaged learners we ask to be testers and change champions of what they're experiencing with us. So think about it, those 4 audiences. I'll talk about what we did to get business leaders to support us. So this is the journey that our managers go on in Bloom. And you can see the skills at the top. And at the bottom, all the orange names, those are actual executive leaders who have come in and at first kicked off the program with us, congratulated them because they are nominated and they apply. And then we have executive leaders towards the end of the program actually come in, instructional design, and facilitate modules in the program. And it's such a bright spot for them because they're dealing with the crap of the day-to-day in their jobs, but to come into a learning environment and provide this audience with something that is fun and learning, engaging, it's positive for them as well. And so they're bought in right away, right? And then to have the access to them from a participant perspective that they wouldn't normally have is such a gift to those participants. And then we have our president or our CEO come in at the end and just congratulate this very special high-performing group for us. And so getting them involved has gotten their buy-in for us. Okay. That's probably the fastest I've gone through slides in my life. So if you have any questions, pop them into the Q&A feature. We'll be sure to answer those, and you can reach out to me as well separately.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Minji. That was really just helpful to see even your frameworks, some of the exact language you use in your job descriptions. Like hopefully those of you on the line are able to leverage some of what Minji has shared. That is the purpose. Definitely put your questions in the Q&A for Minji. With that, we will pass it over to Wendy now to learn a little bit about how she's architecting L&D at LAZ.
Cool. Thanks, Rhea. Thanks, Minji. That was awesome. We've definitely got some similarities with how we've built our function. All right. So I want to set the stage a little bit for who LAZ Parking is as a company, because if you're like me, you probably haven't thought about the parking industry as an actual thing with people behind it and jobs. Coming over from tech, it was a big learning curve for me to jump into parking. But LAZ Parking is really more than parking. We are a transportation company that spans a lot of different areas. And we're also a lot bigger than you might imagine. So we're a 40-year-old company. We have 15,000 employees. We're in 42 states and we're also in Canada. You're probably going to see us now that like LAZ, LAZ, you're probably going to see us in your cities and be like, oh, yeah, I was just on a webinar with that person. And we manage over 1.6 million spaces around the country. And then you can see our managed revenue on there is 2.1 billion. But we're not just parking cars, right? We do valet service, but we're also running shuttles. For example, if you go to LAX and you take LA exit, that's us. If you go to some universities, we're running the parking not only in the parking lots, not only in the campuses, but we're doing big events. So we work with a lot of universities to run all the sporting events. So you might see flaggers. That's going to be us as well. We also do food and beverage. We've got a lot of different things going on. So we're a lot more than parking. And my role is actually bigger than learning and development. So I span all of talent management except for talent acquisition and total rewards, and also HR operations. That's not me, but I've got onboarding, performance management, succession planning, employee engagement, all the fun learning stuff. So my scope is a little bit bigger than my title, which matters for the information that I'm going to share for you in a moment. So one piece of information I want to share is when I started at LAZ, I started a year and a half ago, I inherited a blank slate, really similar to Minji. I would have thought that coming into a 40-year-old company that was as big as we are, there would be already systems and processes and programming and things in place. But that was just not the case. I was really given a blank slate, which is super fun if you're in our field and you like to build and you're really all about people. So at LAZ, this is the LAZ way. This is everywhere in the company. It's in our home office. It's in all of our locations, all of our regional offices. Any parking office has this posted. And the reason this is really important is because of our mission statement, which is to create opportunities for our employees and value for our clients. There are many companies out there that say they like to create opportunities for their employees, but nowhere does it like LAZ, at least not in my career. I came in at the level I'm at, and all of my peers, for the most part, have grown up in the company, and they've been there a minimum of 10 years, if not 40 years. They started as valets, they started as parking attendants, they started as cashiers, and they worked their way up. And so I've joined a company that has this unfailing belief in its people and really believes in developing them and finding their next opportunity and helping them move around. So for a development junkie like me, I feel like I've landed in this dream job where I just get to build and create and like help bring to light some core things that are already there as part of the company. So we did have this strong mission statement when I started. We just didn't have much else in the learning and development space. So when I think about and I reflect back on the last year and a half about how did I build the L&D function at LAZ, I'm going to take you through like a 3-part process. So my first bit of advice is to know your landscape. Know the field that you're playing in because it's different in every company, in every market, in every business unit, however it is that you talk about it within your company. And so for me, these are the 4 things that I were my anchors as I was thinking about how do I know the landscape. So first, my team hears me say this all the time. We have to know the problem we're trying to solve. Like, what is it we're actually solving for? What matters to the business? Because it's not about like what we think, it's about what they think and what's important to them. And we'd been throwing spaghetti at the walls before I started. And then the second thing is what are our BHAGs? If that's a new term, that's big, hairy, audacious goals. So what is it that we actually think that we can do? And what are our pie in the sky dreams? Number 3 is what are our core cultural anchors that we need to be attuned to? Like, what are the things that make your company tick that as you think about building and bringing in new things, you have to pay attention to and you can't forget about? And I've got a couple of stories for you later on related to that. And at LAZ, it's really about people, like people above everything else. And then what do we absolutely need to keep doing while we figure this out, right? Well, what programs do we have to maintain while we work behind the scenes to build? And for us, that was 2 things. We really had 2 core things happening. We have a manager development program, a high potential program that goes twice a year, and it's a 10-week cohort-based program. And then at the end of the 10 weeks, we bring everyone to the home office in Connecticut, and we have a big 3-day graduation. And then a coaching program. When I started, we were just launching a workshop called Coaching for Success because LAZ, like many companies, is all in on a coaching culture. We actually don't do formal performance reviews anymore. We got rid of that early in the pandemic and went all in on coaching. And so I had to get that program out the door and up and running while then we built the larger L&D function. So those were my 2 things that I had to keep going. So what I did is I had a team of one. Well, it was me and one other person, and he'd been keeping the lights on. So I brought him to Austin and we sequestered ourselves away for 3 days. And we thought about, what problem are we trying to solve? What are our BHAGs? Where are we trying to get to? What do we need to do? And at the end of those 3 days, we came up with our vision as well as these key tenets of our vision. And these are the 5 things that we are attuned to as we build for LAZ. Any inbound requests that we get from clients, we put through the lens of how is it going to help us move the needle on these 5 things. And if it's not going to, then our answer to someone is generally, yes, we can help you. Be patient. Not yet, but we'll get there. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So then the second thing that I'll offer, and this was a question at the very start, is like, how do I know how to prioritize and what to work on? So it's really important that you do get clear on what matters and what you're expected to deliver on. And the tool that I'll offer is a prioritization matrix. I know this is a very busy slide, so I'm going to walk you through it. So if this is your first time with the prioritization matrix, they're really handy to help you think about what should you be working on. You've got effort along the bottom, and you've got impact along the side. And we took all of the projects that we'd been tasked with and put them in this matrix. So if we thought that it took high effort and was also going to be high impact, that is a major project. If it's low effort and high impact, that's an easy win. If it's high effort, low impact, that's a thankless task. And then if it's low effort, low impact, those are small incremental improvements that we can make. So this helped us because I kept hearing like levels at LAZ are all over the place. One title here doesn't mean the same thing as one title there. We also call them different things, which if you're in our industry, that's really putting job architecture in place. And when we thought about it, we realized that's not worth it. That's a thankless task. We're going to let that go. And we're going to focus on our major projects. That's where the majority of our resources is going to go. But then those easy wins so that we can build momentum and build champions and build fans along the way and show that we're making a difference. So we focused our efforts on those top 2 quadrants. And then you can also see that for every project, we mapped it back to our 5 key tenets. Is it going to help us be data-driven? Is it going to help us be best in class? Is it going to help us with onboarding? So we wanted to make sure that everything was anchored in one of those 5. And then the last piece that I'll share is for building our function was to focus on infrastructure. So while we were doing the coaching program, while we were doing our manager development, our high potential program, we were working furiously behind the scenes to build infrastructure. And that's data infrastructure, tech infrastructure, and people infrastructure. So on the data infrastructure side, we relaunched the engagement survey. That is something the company hadn't done since pre-pandemic. And so we redid it. We now have 2 years of data, which is really great because we also put action planning in place, which the company hadn't done before. So we tasked each region to put concrete actions, like their top 3 items they want to address and what are they going to do about it. And we would meet monthly about it to talk about how it was going. And then we can actually see the progress on that year over year, which is cool. We focused on our HRIS. We used ADP, and our talent data was a mess. ADP was really used for payroll at LAZ, and it was as long as people were getting paid the way they needed to, we didn't bother with updating employee profiles or information. So reporting lines were wrong, locations were wrong, which when you're then trying to feed that data into like an LMS matters a lot. So we focused on that. And then we focused on program data. There's a lot of things that have happened over the years, like ad hoc mentorship programs, and we have a leadership summit and manager development, but we hadn't been looking at what's the impact of those programs on retention and promotion rates. So we finally pulled that data and we were able to show amazing results. We were able to show that for those that participate in our program, the retention rate is 83% for those employees versus the company benchmark, which was 73%. And then for promotion rates, we were able to show that those that participated in programming were seeing a 37% promotion rate versus the 15% benchmark for LAZ. And that was like such an eye-opener for a lot of people because we hadn't looked at that data before. And it was like, okay, so we are doing some really good things that we need to keep doing. And then on the technology side, similar to Minji, we put an LMS in place. LAZ had never had an LMS before, and it's been an eye-opener for the company about what the power of an LMS can do in terms of centralizing everything, and really getting strong data and reporting. We worked on consolidation and integration. So there's other learning systems that people had brought in. For example, we are big on safety at LAZ, right? We're a transportation company. And so there's a whole other system out there called Got Safety that we were using that is mandatory safety training that we didn't even know about, that we only found out about like 3 months ago. But now we've taken that and we've put it into the LMS so that it can be part of the manager dashboard. And then I think maybe most importantly, we built a partnership with our internal business intelligence team. We've got this great business intelligence team that prior to me starting had really only been focused externally on like client reporting and client data. And then I started and I was like, wait a minute, can we have a business intelligence team? Can we use them to help us internally? And the head of business intelligence was so eager to partner and work with us and to create dashboards for us on our programming and to really show the effectiveness of what we're doing. And on the engagement survey, helped us build very robust dashboards on our engagement survey. I've got a meeting with him next week. I've got a laundry list of 7 things for next year that I want to do with him and build together. So it's really important if you do have that function within your company that you're leveraging them. And then on the people side, we're tiny. I know Minji got asked the question of how big was her team. My team's tiny. We're 4 people. So 4 people for 15,000. We started with 2, and then I hired 2 people in January. So we've got myself. I've got someone heading up programming, someone heading up learning technology, and then we have a coordinator on the team. But really the people infrastructure I've focused on is the partnerships at LAZ. So because we can't do it alone, right? And we are here to serve. So we exist. We're not a revenue generating function. We exist to serve the company. And so it's important that we're partnering effectively with anyone our work might touch. So not only business intelligence, but we're working with the PMO team to help us roll things out. We're working with service line leaders. So at LAZ, we've got 7 unique service lines like hospitality, healthcare, transportation. So working very closely with those leaders, working closely with the ADP team. So we're 4 people. It's not just us. It's really an army of people across the company that are bought in that want to help us get this out the door. And then lastly, I'll leave you with something that I just said, which is, this is my mantra, which is I am here to serve. It's not about what I want. It's about what the company needs and how can I help the company solve its problems. And I try and take myself out of it. So I will leave you there and we will open it up to questions.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Minji. We have some great questions already from our participants, which is fantastic. Feel free to put in any additional questions as we continue this conversation. Just reflecting on both the presentations, what stood out to me is this idea of data. How do you get the impact data that's important? Both of you also leverage engagement surveys, which I know a lot of other organizations do. You're tying metrics together, whether you have that capability in your L&D team or you're partnering with others with that capability throughout. That really stood out to me. And then the second thing is building your ecosystem. Both of your teams are small, right? It's actually shocking that you only have 4 people, Wendy, with that many people, right? And Minji, looking at your list of things you've accomplished as your foundation with just that number of people, you're really capitalizing on resources, which tends to be what we need to do as an L&D function. It's rare that companies heavily invest in headcount in L&D, frankly. Across the hundreds of companies that we work with, I see it time and time again. There's always resource constraints. We got a few questions on that. So I wanted to start there, and feel free to put in more questions, folks, as you're listening to our answers. But one of the questions that I had that's tied with some of the questions you've already asked is L&D teams are usually tasked with more than we can chew at a given time, right? So there's always a million people priorities that we need to tackle, and there's only so many people on our teams, so much budgets have been getting cut, resource constraints, etc. Wendy, you showed that amazing chart, but would love to dive a little bit deeper into that. And Andrea also posted this question too, like, how do you navigate the prioritization when things come up? How do you ensure what needs to get done gets done? Maybe we'll start, Minji, if it's okay with you. And then Wendy would love to dive deeper into how you use that tool, how we can use that tool, or anything else related to that.
Yeah, The prioritization of a business seems to be changing ever more frequently. Like earlier in this year, I think we can all agree, like so much of business priorities were like about efficiency and being as like cost effective as possible. In a greenhouse context, we're now really focused on employee retention. We're going for growth next year. In order for us to achieve that business growth, we have to make sure our top talent remains and is engaged. And so, like, based on whatever the business priority is, like the number one most important thing to the business, that's when you can tailor and like select the actual programs and resources that you're delivering. Anything that deviates from those priorities is a waste of time, quite frankly, and shouldn't be, to Wendy's matrix, should not be prioritized. So, yeah.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, so for us, I mentioned that we've got our 5 key tenets, and we really do use that and to like vet requests when they come in and say, okay, where can it go in here? And then we continue to use that matrix that I showed you. It wasn't just a one-time thing. And by the way, that I did not come up with that. You can look it up. It's a prioritization matrix that'll come up. You can find it. And so we do continue to use that. But I found my job, so much of my job is just continually telling people about our vision and meeting with all of our key partners. Here's our vision. Here's where we're going to. Here's our roadmap. Here's what we've done. Here's our successes. It's like I am on rinse and repeat again and again. And it's amazing how far that gets us as a team when we say, here's what we're doing and here's what we've done. I hear you. I hear your requests. For example, our service lines, when I first started, I met with the head of healthcare. I met with the head of hospitality. I met with the head of university, who all said, Wendy, we need onboarding. We need onboarding for healthcare, onboarding for hospitality, et cetera. It was like, okay, yes, that is one of our key tenets, right? Standardized and consistent onboarding. So yes, not yet though. Let us cast the wide net. Let us get onboarding out the door for the masses at LAZ, because we don't have that right now. And then as a V2, we'll get really specific with your service lines. But what we found is that as we're building onboarding for the masses, it's actually touching on the things that they care about in the service lines. And so we're able to show them, like, it's just enough, right, to show them that, yes, we're meeting your need. Be patient a little bit longer. We're going to come. And for a V2, it's going to be all about you and you're going to be our priority. And I've found to get a lot of grace and patience as long as I'm like tying everything back to like, here's what matters and here's what we're doing. So just stay true to your North Star.
Mm-hmm. Don't get overly sidetracked by the shiny new object that might be coming down the pike when you know that foundational work needs to get done in order to better address those shiny things perhaps in the future. Right. That's what I'm hearing. And I love this idea of having, I know Minji also has a North Star for the team, like a team mission that ladders up to a company mission. And I think that's really a powerful thing to even just workshop with your team. So we got a couple of questions and I'm going to like combine them into one question from you all on the line. So thank you for continuing to submit your questions. So one is about, we're getting more into L&D content now. One is about career pathing and job architecture, which we saw on some of your slides, and defining that. And then the second one that I'm going to combine is then how do you maybe use that understanding to identify the skills that are needed for the different levels in the organization, right? And we might all have different levels of sophistication in terms of what our job architecture and career pathing is. Maybe you don't have it, maybe you do, but certainly we have to think about the skills by level. So wondering if we could try to address multiple questions in there, folks. Hold me honest if I miss something, but would love to hear Wendy or Minji, your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll kick us off. Minji, mind if I kick us off on this one? So a couple thoughts. So career development or career pathing, that is very broad and everyone defines that differently. That's something we've heard a lot at LAZ because I'll be honest, we don't have that. There is no formal or defined career development or career pathing. People are always wanting to know what their next step is. So what we're actually doing on our side is we're working to define that. So that's work we're doing right now. We're kicking off focus groups in January to say, okay, you say you want career development. What does that mean to you? Is it upward? Is it lateral? What we're most often hearing is it's honestly just visibility into the company as a whole and all the things that we do, because we don't have an internal communications team at LAZ. We're not great at pushing down like big company initiatives. And I may have mentioned, I don't know, I know Minji mentioned this, that we are very disparate in our company. We are regionally driven. And so it's really important that we figure out what people want in that role of like career development. And then in terms of the skills piece, so we've done some really fun work over the last year to develop a skills model for LAZ. We call it the people model. And what we looked at, this was fun. I led a working group with leadership where we looked at what are the top skills needed for success at LAZ, regardless of level. So not by level, but what skill that applies from a valet up to a president. And we mapped it out against 4 key characteristics of LAZ. So like we've got 4 key buckets. They are, a couple of them are, we put people first, we embrace an entrepreneurial spirit, we're socially conscious, and we keep an open mind. So those are like our 4 big things. And then underneath that, we mapped out 8 skills, each one. So a total of 32 skills. And then from there, we'll get level specifics with rubrics. I mentioned we don't have performance management at LAZ, but there's desire to bring it back. So we're going to use that skills model we created to create leveled rubrics. So rubrics for general managers, rubrics for director of operations. And that's where you get like, you bring a skill to life of like, okay, so you say that I need to, for example, embrace new technology. What does that mean for someone in my role as the vice president of learning and talent development versus a general manager running operations in Ohio? So that's the level specific work that we're doing around skills, which is really fun work. And then Minji, I'll hand it over to you if you want to add on.
It's so funny because we have spent the better part of my tenure working on the performance process where we're building the foundation of how we can measure performance, and the job architecture, what we call career ladders here at Greenhouse, is an input to how you measure performance. And so it's actually a project that we need to do next year. Huge project. It'll be a huge project next year to actually refine what we have, because they're actually lagging. They're outdated from what we require in terms of skills and what we see as high performance at Greenhouse now, in the reality that we live in now in the last few months. And so it's one of those things that can change and needs to be iterated on based on the phase of what the business needs. We have just spent more time building on the actual things that can leverage those things. Like we include like company values and how your behaviors are aligned to those. We include OKRs and individual goals and those career ladders. These are inputs into measuring performance, but those things still need worked on, if that makes sense. So that's to come for us in 2025.
You got to do bite-size things, right? You can't bite the whole, what's the phrase? I don't know. One bite at a time, right?
Yeah.
There's only so much that we can do. Thank you. We got a couple of very tactical questions that I actually want to answer because given the topic on architecting your L&D function, I think they're really relevant and interesting to think about. So one of them is, at what size organization or how many employees does it make sense to consider getting an LMS? There's no right answer here, I could tell you that. Customers at home of all sizes have LMSs or don't have LMS. You could have 10,000 people and not have an LMS, or you could have 100 people and have an LMS. So I'm curious. Yeah, I'm just curious, what are some factors that we should consider when making the decision to get an LMS?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer this. So I actually think it's less about the number of employees and more about the stage of maturity and the needs of the org. If there's a skills gap, if you need to scale whatever the employee population is, it's worth having it, right? You have to do a cost benefit analysis on that. I will say that interestingly enough, we had more mature sales enablement teams at Greenhouse, and they were the ones who purchased the tool that we used. We didn't get our own LMS. We adopted theirs and then just scaled it to all of the other functions, G&A and engineering. And And so we're actually using a sales enablement tool right now, which is okay because it still has the bells and whistles that we need. And so I think it's really context specific, but I think in general, a general statement is I tend to enjoy working at companies that have at least 200 employees or more, but no more than 1,000, just because of the building nature of an L&D role as opposed to a maintenance role at larger organizations that can tend to happen if they're already established in their function.
I want to add on one thing. I agree with everything Minji said. And my add is that for a company like ours, where we're in a high claims business, right? Like people are driving cars and there's a lot of different accidents, right? Even as valets, there's a lot of claims, or there's customers that come to us, clients that come to us that submit claims. It's really important to be able to track the learning that people have done, particularly on the compliance side. So we've got a lot of mandatory compliance training, everything from standard things that we all do, like sexual harassment prevention training, to things like safe driving practices. Or we have a really popular, necessary one, which is golf cart driving. You wouldn't think there'd be a lot of golf cart accidents. There are. So we, from a legal perspective, need to be able to pull reporting to show what people have done. And that's where an LMS is really helpful for us as well. And that's not about size. We could be tiny and still need that. So
yeah, it makes perfect sense. Really, it's a tracking vehicle to make that easier and compliant. So also love everyone in the chat putting in their LMSs and things to consider. We're all learning people and HR people on the line usually, so feel free to add your piece or your thoughts in the chat. We can learn from each other. I love that. Another question that I like that's more logistical, but I think really relevant, is around surveys. So we talked about engagement surveys and the importance of tying those metrics. We also often get our program impact survey results, like Minji, you shared a pre-post survey. We use a lot of surveys in L&D. Have either of you found any best practices or tips in ensuring that you get good response rates to these types of surveys? Whether engagement survey or L&D program surveys, I'll leave it broad.
I'll give two tips.
Yeah.
One for the engagement survey. And this is, again, we have thousands of locations around the country. So we actually get our local HR business partner team, who's like boots on the ground. They go around from location to location with tablets and help employees answer the engagement survey if they want to. Of course, very voluntary, but they go location to location and they like walk the streets and to get engagement responses. And we've gotten a higher response rate than we've ever had on this last one. And then it was like 6,100 employees responded to the survey, which for LAZ is awesome. And then the other tip that I'll have, and this is more for like general learning surveys, one thing we found to be really effective is in our LMS, after someone completes a course, like for example, all compliance training, when someone finishes a course, a survey pops up on what else do you want to learn? And that's after every single course. So we're constantly getting more and more data. And that takes the burden off of us because it's automated and it just automatically pops up. And so that's been really helpful for us. It goes deeper than what an engagement survey could give us because it's more like topic specific. So that's been helpful.
Greenhouse is a highly competitive culture, so we will run contests to get departments and people to complete the surveys, engagement surveys. When it comes to program-specific surveys, I am actually someone who is very conscious of people's time, and so I design our learning sessions with that in mind. I always reserve 5 minutes at the end of the session to play music and to actually have the participants fill out the surveys before they leave the Zoom call so I can watch them. Like, it is the most accountable thing that I can do. Otherwise, they go off about their day and they won't fill it out later on their own time. And so that's just one way at a high touch level I can get those results from them.
Well, and actually your responses are really similar, which is the hardest part is getting them to spend the time. So if you're in their face, whether in person or virtually, and you're making them make the time, that's your best bet to get an increase in response rate. And we do the same thing in all of our learning journeys as well. Like the end of a class, you got a couple minutes to do the survey because we know you're going to go to your next meeting and you're never going to complete it. So I love that, capturing the audience. And speaking of, we have 4 minutes left. Really appreciate everyone's questions here. To close out the session, I would love just Wendy, Minji, we always ask at the end, based on today's conversation and the questions we get, if there's one like key tip or concept that you want the audience to walk away with that you think has been the most helpful for you in your career, would love to have that be the final thought for today's webinar. I see you nodding, Wendy. Do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. So my key piece of advice is go where you're celebrated, not tolerated. And that was advice that I received from an executive coach I worked with many years ago. And when he told me that, it was like a gut punch. And because I had spent so much of my career knocking down doors, like trying to be heard, like, hey, look at all these cool things, instead of really paying attention and putting my time and energy on like the doors that were already open, the people that were already saying, hey, come work with us, come work with us. And that is like a mantra for life for me now. It's for how I define my work. It's how like friends, how I spend my social time. Like go where you're celebrated, go where you're wanted. Because if you're successful there, the rest will follow. And I've found that to be very true at LAZ. We're huge, so many different regions. I work with the ones that are hungry to work with us. And now that we've shown that we can, what we can do, more are coming, and they're coming to us, which is a much better place to be than you having to like pull them along. So that's my advice.
Love that. You're getting a lot of love in the chat for that one too, Wendy. Super powerful. Minji, what are your thoughts?
That really resonated with me because no other place that I've ever worked for, other than as much as Greenhouse, has celebrated me and the talents and that I've brought, and it just kind of rocket ships your career, launches you into a different space. So I would say if anyone here has ever performed on stage, you were a ballerina, you were a saxophone player, or you did theater or whatever, that analogy has helped me a lot in that at the end of the day, you know what you can do and you're going to show them what you can do, but they don't know what you're going to show them. The leaders, the employees, they don't know what's coming for them. And so as long as you stay true to yourself in what you can do is to the best of your ability, they will be wowed. You will get wins on the board. You will do the things that surprise them that they didn't expect, that will be impactful. And so to just trust that when you're on that stage, you're going to deliver something that's going to be impactful to them, and they don't know what's coming. So any of that imposter syndrome can go right out the door.
I love it. I love it. So true. Thank you, Minji. And thank you, both of you, Minji, Wendy, for putting your presentations together, being here with our audience today. It's always so helpful to see like real case studies of the learning leaders out there who are making a difference at their organizations for their employees. So huge kudos to all of the work that you've done. And thank you again for sharing with us. And thank you to everyone on the line for joining and spending an hour with us. We know that it's not easy to find the time for continuous development, and that's what you did by joining us today to learn some new things. We always have more coming up from Hone. So our next webinar is going to be on December 19th. Hopefully it'll be a slower week for you. You'll have the time to join. We are joining Scott Burgess from Continue, and we're talking all about how to market your programs, and we're learning some best practices from those in marketing. So definitely sign up for that if you can. And with that, thank you again. We are right on time. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a happy Thanksgiving if you're in the US. And we'll see you on December 19th. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.